Thanks for staying with us on the conversation. Earlier on, we discussed situations in Nigeria where the ECOWAS court has ruled that the tweeted ban in Nigeria was illegal. Right now, we switch to situations in Libya as leaders of security and military factions in the western region have reacted to Fathi Bashagha's intention to carry out a new attempt to enter Tripoli. In a cold dismissal, the military factions reiterated that Tripoli is a red line and vowed to confront any attempts to generate chaos within the area or seek to sow discord among security components in the capital Tripoli. Fathi Bashagha, Prime Minister appointed by the Libyan House of Representatives, had recently claimed that he received support from the military leaders there. The leaders reaffirmed their strict rejection of a new transitional phase under any guise, stressing the need to hold elections on fair constitutional grounds. They reaffirmed their support for national reconciliation, provided that war criminals are barred from positions of power. In this context, the leaders cautioned against attempts to tailor laws and constitutions to suit specific people. Now, joining us live for this conversation, we have Dr. Mustafa Fetouri, a journalist currently in Tripoli, Libya. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you again.
Nice to have you again on the conversation. So, Dr. Fetouri, recently, Bashagha said he has since received positive invitations to enter the capital, Tripoli. How factual is this, judging from the position of the military factions?
I'm not sure I heard the question clearly, but I suppose you were talking about the possibility Mr. Bashagha mentioned over a few days ago of coming to Tripoli.
Yes.
Is that so?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's very fluid situation. You cannot be sure really in Libya's today's politics, what's going on. So, but generally speaking, I think it will be still quite difficult for Mr. Bashagha to enter the capital and resume his duties and that of his government, as elected government by the parliament, as long as Mr. Dbeiba still enjoy the backing of the different militias in and around the capital, which we have seen in display just 2 days ago when they supported the newly appointed NOC head, Mr. Baghdara, appointed by the Prime Minister, Mr. Bashagha, to take over the headquarters of the national corporations, which was, which happened by use of force. Actually, it was not any procedural or legal issues or procedures for that matter involved within the takeover. This shows that Mr. Bashagha still, until today, and for the foreseeable future, enjoys the support of different militias as long as he has the money, which means that Mr. Bashagha or any other person who's attempting to take over the government from Mr. Dbeiba will not be successful.
Okay, Dr. Fetouri, in May, I recall we had this discussion on this program. Prime Minister Fathi Bashagha arrived in the capital, Tripoli, attempting to take over office there, but it sparked widespread clashes. Now, fast forwarding to a few months later to today, do we see clashes happening if he does go into Tripoli? And has there been diplomatic entreaties between Bashagha and Abdulhamid Dbeiba, to try to smoothen things out? Because what gives him the confidence that if he goes into Tripoli today, the same thing that happened in May would not repeat itself?
Well, I agree with you in both points, but unfortunately, I did not have any information that there has been any when it comes to diplomatic maneuvers or mediations by any third party, whether from inside Libya or outside Libya, about the issue of Mr. Bashagha taking over from Mr. Dbeiba. For Mr. Dbeiba, this is out of the question. This is very unlikely. The man still considers himself to be the legal and legitimate Prime Minister of the country, as elected by the UN facilitated talks in Geneva earlier this year, and accordingly, he doesn't see any point or any legitimate or legal reason that would force him to give up power to Mr. Bashagha's government. That's for the diplomacy, if you like, side of the equation. For the military side of the equation, it's very unlikely that we will see any clashes in terms of large-scale clashes between the two sides. And behind that, there are several reasons why clashes are not expected, let alone larger-scale war around Tripoli like we have seen in 2019, 2020. One of the reasons, or the top reason, actually, is nobody is interested anymore in taking up arms and settling differences through fighting. That's one thing. The second thing, the international community, especially the United States and those who have the upper hand, if you like, in the Libyan file, they are not supporting any military action at the time, given the fact that they are quite busy with what is happening with the Ukraine and war around the world because of the repercussions of that war. Thirdly, and most importantly, Libyans have grown really tired of fighting, and most of the people are not, are not interested in fighting anymore. Plus the fact, which is very important, Mr. Bashagha lacks the financial means, if you like, to enable him to mount a serious military challenge to those who control the capital. So for all that, I don't really expect any clashes anytime soon. And if anything will happen, I don't think such a scale, relatively large scale military clashes are likely before the autumn at the earliest.
Now, for better understanding, why is Tripoli referred to as a red line by the leaders of security and military factions in the Western region?
What did you say about the red line? I'm sorry.
I said, why is Tripoli referred to as the red line?
Well, it's, we heard a lot of talk about red lines in Libya over the last few years, especially in and around Tripoli. But one thing is certain, neither the United States nor the United Kingdom nor France or Italy, those are the major powers, international powers that have the final say in the Libyan file so far. None of them is actually supporting any military action. They don't believe, as I said before, they don't believe the whole political background and differences and quarrels can actually be settled through military force. And the option of using military force to take over power has been tried several times before, the last of which was 2019 and 2020, as I mentioned, led by Mr. Haftar from the eastern region, part of the country to take over Tripoli. And that failed. In fact, that has drawn in more military beefing up for the local forces by countries like Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. And the Turkish forces are still here, and they are still defending Tripoli and the Western region, not for the sake of the government of Mr. Gbenga, but actually for their own sake, because they already have established several military bases in the country, and they want to maintain that influence.
Now, Dr. Fetouri, before we begin to wrap things up, we have a situation where there's a prime minister in Tripoli, there's another prime minister based in Tobruk. Now, where does the fate of the ordinary Libyans stand in all of this? What are the consequences of having these divisions of the country? And do you see, how do you see this playing out in the long run?
Well, when it comes to the ordinary Libyans, they are the suffering majority, unfortunately, and they don't trust either side. They don't trust Mr. Bibi. They know he's quite corrupt, probably the most corrupt prime minister in the country's history, at least the last 10 years since the Gaddafi regime was toppled in 2011. That's one side. They also look with contempt at Mr. Bashagha because they have seen him with double faces. One time he was supporting the militias when he was Minister of Interior in the previous government in Tripoli, and now he's claiming he wants to eliminate them and he doesn't want any militias controlling the western side of the country nor controlling any government in Tripoli. And the other side of things, for the Libyans, the ordinary Libyans, life actually goes on, but as a continuous non-stop struggle. Everything is going badly in terms of the health system, the educational system, the infrastructure, which is falling apart, and the lack of security. Relatively, the capital nowadays, for the last few months, has been quite secure, with as little troubles as you could remember over the last few years. But still, it's not, we have, for example, a very long power cuts in the capital nowadays. I have been here 2 weeks and it never stopped. Sometimes it lasts for between 8 and 10, 11 hours a day. So we are lucky that we have power now that I could talk to you easily over the air, because that will, otherwise would have, affected the connection. So for the Libyans, they really lost any trust, any respect for the entire political elite, if you like, either be the parliamentarians themselves, those in the executive branch, whether Mr. Bashagha's government insert or Mr. Gbenga's government in Tripoli. They don't trust them anymore. The only thing the Libyans aspire for nowadays is elections. They want elections as soon as possible. Full stop.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Fetouri. Of course, we do hope for the best in Libya, especially with the power cuts going on, and that the demands of the people are met. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Fetouri.
Pleasure always. Thank you for having me.
That's where we'll draw the curtains for today's edition of The Conversation. Earlier on, we dealt on the ECOWAS ruling, given that the mandate of the Nigerian government, which banned Twitter, was illegal. And right now, we've just finished discussions in Libya, where the armed groups have warned the rival Prime Minister, Fathi Bashagha, not to cross the red line, that is, not to enter into Tripoli, because in Libya, right now, we have two rival governments ruling the country. We do hope for the best in Libya. Do join us again next week for another edition of The Conversation. I am Rita Omodia.
Thank you very much for being a part of The Conversation. I'm Gbenga Aborowa. See you on Monday and have a nice weekend.